Now I'm sure most of you have seen Makoto Yukimura's amazing work, Vinland Saga, following the misadventures of Thorfinn Karlsefni and his growing up under constant states of war and battle which shape him into the absolute unit we see from him today. Now this video isn't quite about him, or Thors, or Askeladd, or even Canute. It is in fact about Old Man Leif, also known to many history buffs and others alike as Leif Erikson. Now this may shock fans of the show as, after all, in the beginning he's a perv, and then as the show goes on he becomes quite the kindred soul in his tireless quest to pursue Thorfinn. However, what fans may forget is his adventures into the place Thorfinn seeks so badly to find one day, Vinland. Now, while the children don't believe him, I assure you Mr. Yukimura didn't just pull that out of thin air, instead most likely read up on the topic of today's video, the Saga of the Greenlanders, the Norse epic poem recounting the tales of the legendary European discoverer of America. Without further ado, let's get on it! The epic is divided into 9 chapters, with the first recounting some background you need to get the full picture on the upcoming adventure. There are 2 main stories detailing the discovery of America via the Vikings, being the Saga of the Greenlanders and the Saga of Eric the Red, father to Leif, and it gives lots of background to this story. It begins speaking of a Thorvald who with his son Eric the Red are forced away from Jæger into exile in Iceland for killing people. While in Iceland, Thorvald dies in time for Eric the Red to have his own child named Leif. Soon after, they are forced to move again as Eric gets himself into more trouble, forcing him to leave west with Leif. Eric on his exit left his belongings with a man named Thorgest, who would not give them back upon Eric's return, leading to many a dispute that led to a rift in the people, with these men all taking Eric's side and these men taking Thorgest's stance. Eric was declared a fugitive, and he left out to the docks where all his supporters watched him depart as he declared he would return back if he ever found land. He journeyed off from... I'm not even going to try pronouncing that, and ended up in a place called Greenland, named Midjokul, where he went south to find more livable land. He came upon Eriksjø, Eriksfjord, and Holm, and Bredefjord. He dubbed the entire island Greenland to entice people to come, leaving back to Iceland and returning with 35 ships with notable figures. You might recognize the names from the show. So remember this guy from earlier? Well, he has a child now named Bjarn, who's a pretty chill guy. He's very bright-eyed, he makes a lot of money quickly, and he's a real people person. Everyone loves Bjarn. From a young age, Bjarn always had a call to adventure, and he was always abroad. He eventually got his own ship, so Herjolf decided to leave him to his own devices as he went to Eric the Red over to Greenland. Bjarn followed after with his own crew, but he was very wary at first, given all the danger of navigating the unknown seas out west. He quickly noted that this voyage may not go very well, since none of them had actually ever been to Greenland yet, but I'm sure it'll be fine. They began their high seas adventure, and as soon as they did, a massive fog came down, the winds fell upon them rapidly, and each time they stumbled upon land, Bjarn wouldn't let them land because it wasn't Greenlandy enough for him. Finally, they stumbled upon a land with icy hills that was still somewhat inhabitable, and went to his father to live with him and gave up his ocean traveling. Eric's son, Leif, when he was older, came to Bjarn and bought his old ship from him as Leif gathered a crew of 35 men to accompany him. He also asked his father to join, but he was denied at first, giving his old ripe age of around 50 as an excuse not to go. But the second his son started hyping up the esteemed Eric the Red, who voyaged far, discovered Greenland, and slayed any man in his way, Eric perked up and solemnly got himself to go. He then immediately fell off his horse, and taking this as a bad omen, as any good Viking would do, Eric decided to go back, saying he found all the land he needed to find in one lifetime. They were off. They first came across where Bjarn landed, which they gave a name. They came across many lands with different traits, varying from trees to nice grass to a tasty-looking floor. They then docked near one of the lands, thought to be present-day Nantucket, to regroup and set up camp. They stayed for the winter as Leif told them to divide and conquer among the lands so they could explore and see what it held. Little did he know how close he was to discovering something vast and great, unlike all those left in Iceland. So they're on this little landmass where they're exploring it all over and can't see much beyond from all the thick fog. When they all return back to camp, they discover a man named Tyrker gone missing. This hit Leif close to home, since Tyrker had raised him alongside Eric and was like an uncle to him. That was until he came back much later, speaking all crazy like in German with his eyes rolling back into his skull which no one could understand. Eventually he calmed down and told everyone that he had found grapes and vines on a certain part of the island, and Leif organized everyone into groups to harvest before leaving, finally dubbing the land Vinland, on account of the fact that there was grapes everywhere, because that's exactly what Vinland translates to, Wineland. They then set off for Greenland again, with Leif noticing a rock in the fog distinct for its unnatural phenomenon of having people atop it. He asked who led them, which was a man named Thor, who questioned Leif if he was with Eric or Brattlehead, going back to that age-old conflict. He allowed them on his boat as they appeared stranded, where they dropped off most of them except Thor, his wife, and 3 other men, where he got them these dock-type things called berths. He was now deemed Leif the Lucky between his esteemed riches and newly found respect from those around him. Also, his dad was now dead. During the winter, heavy sickness and ailments hit Eric hard, and Thorvald convinced Leif to let him go on another voyage to Vinland. Thorvald was off with 30 men all on his own for the very first time! With some counsel from Leif, of course, though. It's a hard voyage, guys. Let's give him some breathing room. He eventually got to Vinland and found it quite odd that there was literally no one there, nothing other than an old shed for corn as far as actual human monuments. The whole place looked deserted as they explored, so they returned to the camp made by Leif. A storm then swept in, destroying their boat, and they had to settle for smaller repairs, making Thorvald make a really horrible pun that still amazes me with how goofy it was. Thorvald and co. then went on to more land out east and docked on the shores, where Thorvald noted how beautiful it was before immediately springing into action with his men when they saw 3 canoes up ahead, slaughtering 8 of the guys inhabiting them before the last got away. All of them found the supposed homes of the men they killed and promptly fell asleep right then and there like Goldilocks. They were then awoken with the sound of battle cries, as when you leave only one alive, revenge is the only path left, with Skraeling firing at Thorvald and his crew before fleeing. Did any of you get shot? Great! So, I did. He then delivered a haunting speech detailing how they would bury him, and the poem tells us that Greenland was now Christian, which is totally pizzazz, and you should totally believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. Radical, man! This chapter is definitely something sad, gloomy, and not all the most fun to read through, so I'll try to move through fast. Basically, the less talked about of Eric's children, Thorstein decided to go out on a voyage of his own to Vinland. By summer, they were to Greenland, where a man named Thorstein the Black offered to let him take refuge, and Thorstein and his wife obliged. Soon, though, their whole crew began to fall ill one by one, and soon they died. Eventually, Thorstein the Black's wife died as well from her ailments, with her husband burying her with great difficulty. The crew was long dead, and soon Thorstein would be too. His wife, Gudrid, sat him beside her outside with Thorstein the Black, and he tried to comfort her in her time of distress, speaking of all the nice things they could do once this was all over. Thorstein Eriksson then propped himself up and asked where his wife was. Thorstein the Black urged her not to answer, but he announced that he simply wanted to wish her well. And so he did. A final last sign of goodwill before he would leave them and us. Thorstein the Black fulfilled the promises that he made to Gudrid, selling his farm and the cattle to do so, before she returned the leaf, when Thorstein went to Eriksfjord. Such a fun, happy chapter, am I right? So after everyone but Leif had terrible expeditions in an attempt to find Vinland, everybody wanted to come even more. It was like the Viking hotspot for everyone to find, a modern-day Atlantis for the Middle Ages. The brothers Helgi and Finnbogi were off from Norway to Greenland to begin their adventure there. This is since Freydis, daughter to Eric, egged them on to find Vinland and split their profits with her since she had the idea. It was all arranged, but she allowed 5 men onto their ships without the brothers knowing, breaking their deal. They wanted Leif's houses he put there since he wouldn't give Freydis ownership over them. When they got to Vinland, they came up with their supplies and Freydis was all, wait, who's getting these guys? Oh yeah, it's me! The brothers were forced to build a house of their own, and they tried to keep the mood light with festivities, but eventually the bad blood in the air made it hard. One day, Freydis went over to the house that had been built by the brothers and approached Finnbogi to settle the discord they'd been feeling for so long. She then demanded their boat since it was larger, since Finnbogi denied, so she went back to her home with Thorvald, all cold and covered in mud, claiming she was disgraced by the brothers and that she had to avenge this disgrace. They went at night, drowning the men and slaughtering them, while Freydis did away with all the women, taking their ships and goods and selling them all, while it mentions a man named Karlsefni, mentioned once earlier in the epic, who embodies someone you might be familiar with. Now, Freydis wanted to keep the events of her crime very hush-hush, but the men she worked with on the job didn't keep their mouths shut, and word quickly spread to Leif. He then tortured 3 men said to have worked with her, and they all got the same account of the night. Leif cursed Freydis and her descendants, speaking ill of them all. Now you might be asking, hey, isn't this the chapter about Thorfinn? Well, I have just the thing for you. Thorfinn, referred to in the epic as Karlsefni, began a quick voyage and got around to Norway, where he traded. He and his wife are both mentioned as being held highly by the highest known people of Norway, paralleling his appearance with Canute in Season 2. Soon after, he left Norway and went to Vinland, making a brief trade with someone before he left for some gold. He and his wife Gudrid settled down there and had a child named Snorri before Thorfinn eventually died, having Gudrid take all his assets. Alright, listen here, you little bitch. I'm getting sick and tired of you ruining every part of my favorite anime. You can't be telling me that the great Thorfinn died just like that. So yes, Thorfinn does die, but doesn't that make it all more worth it in the end? Thorfinn, as of Season 2 of Vinland Saga, wants to go to the legendary Vinland of Old Man Leaf stories to bring peace in life. The fact he actually got there in the end and led a life of comfort and joy really illustrates the greatness of the morals in Vinland Saga. Nearly everyone who attempted to get there used wrongful methods or struggled immensely. Finally, when it came to Thorfinn, his lineage went on as he died a peaceful death. His lineage were the ones to begin setting up the way for Christianity to begin in Iceland, setting up churches and becoming bishops. The Saga of the Greenlanders is a surreal while at the same time incredibly grounded read. It explains why Leif was so offended to be thought of as weak and boring because he truly was one of the only 2 navigators who made it to Vinland without dramatically spiraling into an untimely death. Knowing all this stuff about the character really makes me appreciate the work Mr. Yukimoto went into making a masterful story from such a few short pages. And after seeing the work Thorfinn supposedly went through in his early life, it really is nice to know that he eventually got to Vinland and set up that peaceful end he always wanted to.